Have you ever watched a man destroy his career in under 5 minutes? Because that's exactly what happened on a sticky Monday morning in Greenville, Mississippi. The air was thick with humidity and arrogance. And Officer Kyle Brody? He was sweating both. He didn't know it yet, but the woman he mocked, shoved, and punched in front of half the precinct wasn't just another loud black woman interrupting his morning coffee. She was the storm he invited into his house. And she didn't come alone. No one warned him. No memo, no heads up from HR, no email from the mayor's office. They didn't have time. See, Chief Regina Cole was sworn in late Friday evening in a closed-door ceremony after months of political deadlock and civil unrest. The department had been rocked by lawsuits, federal scrutiny, and explosive protests over brutality, especially in the poor, black neighborhoods of East Greenville. The old chief retired suddenly. And Cole? She was brought in with one mission: clean house. But she didn't walk into the building Monday morning wearing a badge. She wore a plain navy blazer, dark jeans, and a look of quiet resolve. No rank, no entourage, no announcement. Just her and the full weight of the law tucked in a sealed envelope in her purse. She wasn't looking for applause. She was looking for rot. And in under 10 minutes, she found it. It started the way 1,000 injustices do, in silence. Regina stood near the front desk, unnoticed. Ignored. A receptionist scrolled through TikTok. A sergeant laughed too loudly at a joke about welfare mamas. A man in handcuffs sat bleeding from his eyebrow while no one looked his way. She didn't speak, not yet. She just watched. And that's when Officer Brody walked in. White, mid-40s, built like a high school linebacker who never left town. He wore his badge like armor and his prejudice like perfume. He didn't ask her name, didn't ask why she was there, didn't even give her a chance to speak. Just sized her up in one glance. Black woman, alone, assertive, and decided she was a problem. "You lost, ma'am?" he asked, drawing out "ma'am" like it was a threat. "I'm here to speak with Human Resources," Regina replied, her tone steady. He snorted. "What is it? A complaint about your boyfriend getting a ticket? Or are you just mad nobody smiled at you?" Regina stayed still. Calm, collected. But Brody wasn't finished. He stepped closer. "Let me guess, some activist crap. Want us to put up a rainbow flag and sing Kumbaya? We got work to do, lady." And that's when it happened. She said one sentence. "That's all. I'm not here to play games, and you really don't want to find out who I am the hard way." The room stilled. But Brody, arrogant to the core, took it as a challenge. "What, you gonna film me?" he mocked, and the other officers chuckled. Then he did something even he wouldn't believe later. He punched her. Right there. One closed fist, straight to the cheek. Regina dropped to one knee, but not in submission. The fire beneath the badge. The precinct's walls were lined with plaques, honoring a legacy that never belonged to people like her. Chief Renee Marshall sat alone in the conference room, the morning sun slicing through the blinds like interrogation beams. On the surface, everything looked routine. A few administrative folders, a half-empty coffee cup, and a laminated precinct operations schedule. But under the table, her fingers gripped the armrest like a vice. 30 hours had passed since the incident. Since her own lieutenant had laid hands on her. Since he threw a punch that wasn't just aimed at her face, but at everything she represented. Her eye was still bruised, not just from the hit, but from the system that allowed it to happen. Earlier that morning, Internal Affairs had sent down their protocol team. Not to investigate the attack, no, not yet. First came the bureaucracy, statements, paperwork, medical reports, all of it quietly labeled preliminary. Renee knew how these things worked. They hoped she'd go away quietly. They didn't know her. But Renee wasn't thinking about that anymore. Now, her mind had moved to something deeper, something older than the punch. The reason she'd walked into that precinct undercover in the first place. Because something was broken here. And she had felt it the moment she stepped inside. It started the second she entered the station lobby. No badge, no nameplate, just a calm face and business clothes. No one had known who she was. That was the point. She needed to see the place raw, unfiltered, and it delivered. Racist comments were tossed casually near the front desk. Black civilians waited for hours while white walk-ins were helped in minutes. A bulletin board covered in flyers for retired officers, all white. Not one mention of the local community events Renee knew her own department had been asked to sponsor. And then there was Lieutenant Troy Bledsoe. Big, loud, built like a football coach. He carried his authority like a weapon, swinging it at anyone who didn't fit his version of a real cop. She had watched him for weeks before her appointment. Reviewed incident reports he'd signed off on. Internal complaints are buried under layers of silence. What she didn't expect was that it would turn physical. When she refused to back down in the lobby, Bledsoe had lost it. He called her a mouthy stray, grabbed her arm, and when she pulled away, he hit her with a closed fist in front of a dozen officers. Not one stepped in, but then came the fallout. The HR director had emerged just in time to shout, "That's the new chief. You just hit the new goddamn chief." Silence fell like gunfire. Everything stopped, and suddenly, the man who thought he ran the building was the one being handcuffed. That moment should have been a turning point, but that was only the spark. The real fire was just starting to spread. That same day, while Renee was giving her preliminary statement, a second shoe dropped. A whistleblower email, unsigned, landed in her encrypted inbox. It was short, just one sentence. "Check the locker in Evidence Room B, Unit 07. You'll find why Bledsoe felt untouchable." That night, with no cameras and no staff present, Renee walked to the evidence wing. Her clearance got her in. Her instincts got her to Locker 07. Inside, under a stack of fake drug testing kits, she found a hard drive, encrypted. Labeled simply, "Roll call, archive, not for IA." It took her forensic team 3 hours to crack, and when they did, the floodgates opened. Audio files. Dozens of them. Recordings of Bledsoe and other officers during post-shift roll call sessions. Unfiltered conversations. Jokes about cleaning up the streets before the real people move back in. Comments about planting bags to make the paperwork cleaner. References to kicking down doors that don't matter. And most damning of all, casual remarks about Renee's own hiring before she ever stepped foot in the building. One male voice, "That new chief? They're just trying to play the color card again. I give it 6 months before she quits or disappears." Another laughed, "Or we push her out first, like the last one." The last one. That hit Renee like a freight train. She had heard rumors, whispers that her predecessor, Chief Samantha Eng, had been forced out quietly. Retired for health reasons, they said. But now, Renee realized that retirement might have been a euphemism. The department hadn't just been corrupt, it had been running a silent, coordinated purge, and she was next on the list. Back in her office, Renee clicked replay on the final recording, a voice she knew instantly, Bledsoe. "She doesn't belong in command. She's not one of us. Let her make a mistake. We'll handle the rest, just like last time." Renee didn't flinch. She didn't cry. She simply clicked a folder marked "Copy to DOJ" and dragged all 48 audio files into it. The walls of the station had been built in silence. Now she was going to make them echo. She rose slowly, and when she did, the room changed. Because by then, someone had noticed. One of the younger officers, Hernandez, a rookie barely out of the academy, had seen the envelope fall from her purse. He picked it up, curious. And when he opened it and saw the official city seal, the mayor's signature, and the line that read, "Appointment of Chief of Police, Regina Cole," he froze. Everyone froze. Except Brody, because Brody didn't know yet, until Regina turned to face him, eyes like steel, voice like a drum beat through his skull. "You just assaulted your commanding officer." This wasn't just a scuffle. This was a reckoning, and by the time the truth hit him, Brody was already on his knees, not in apology, but in handcuffs. But this story isn't just about one racist cop who picked the wrong woman to mess with. It's about a woman who walked into the lion's den to burn it down from the inside out. It's about the secrets she uncovered, the allies she found, and the war she's about to wage. Because Chief Regina Cole isn't done yet, she's just getting started. The footage from the punch hadn't stayed locked in the department's security archives for long. What Lieutenant Richard Brody didn't know, what none of them knew, was that the precinct had recently installed a new internal surveillance system during an upgrade funded by a community grant. One of the young officers, Officer Malik Gaines, had been part of the IT support team, helping with the setup. He knew exactly which cameras had been silently rolling that morning, and one of them had captured everything. Vanessa Price, still silent after the assault, remained upright. Blood trickled from the corner of her lip. She didn't flinch. She didn't scream. She simply turned her head and looked directly into the nearest wall-mounted camera. She knew. And when she was escorted to HR by the shocked director, the whole building seemed to freeze. No words, no explanations, just the cold realization settling across every face that they had crossed a line they could never uncross. Hours passed. The footage was pulled by Malik, who didn't send it up the official chain of command. Not yet. He sent it to someone he trusted, Detective Aria Delgado, another young officer frustrated by the department's racist underbelly. She, in turn, sent it to an anonymous journalist contact with one line: "Watch this. You'll know what to do." By noon, the footage had already reached 2 major civil rights advocacy groups and 1 national reporter. By 3 p.m., the video was viral on Twitter. There was no way to stop it now. Meanwhile, inside the department, Lieutenant Brody had retreated to his office, already sweating. The HR director had locked her door. Officers on every floor were whispering, speculating, deleting old messages, scrubbing group chats, and praying they hadn't been caught too close to the blast zone. But the explosion wasn't coming. It had already happened, and Vanessa Price was now in full command. She walked back into the precinct in full uniform, polished badge, crisp navy blazer with 4 silver stars, hair pulled into a tight bun. The air shifted as soon as she crossed the threshold. No one spoke. No one moved. Those who had laughed earlier now avoided eye contact. Others watched in stunned silence as she walked straight to the captain's office. The captain wasn't there. He was conveniently on vacation. No matter. Vanessa opened the glass conference room and called a meeting. She didn't wait for formalities. She didn't ask for permission. She simply began. "I am Chief Vanessa Price. You all know that now." A pause. But the real question is, what did you know before today? She let the silence stretch. "Let me help you. You knew how jokes were made in corners, how some officers are never disciplined, how black citizens are treated differently, how women in uniform are patronized, how the people we're supposed to protect are too often the ones we profile." She looked around the room, eye to eye. You didn't just witness a punch, you witnessed a culture, and that culture ends today. Several officers looked down. A few nodded quietly. The younger ones, they looked relieved. But others glared. Officer Josh Tinsley, one of Brody's allies, leaned forward, arms crossed. "With all due respect, Chief, nobody knew who you were. You came in plain clothes. You baited us." Vanessa turned toward him. "You're not angry that I was assaulted. You're angry you were caught." She stepped closer. "If who I was had changed how you treated me, then you were already wrong." Tinsley said nothing more. Suddenly, an alert buzzed through phones across the station. Someone opened Twitter. A video clip was playing. Vanessa. The punch, the silence, the command to arrest Brody. The clip ended with her calm voice saying, "Arrest him." The camera caught Brody's stunned face. It was damning. It was devastating. The room fell into chaos. "You need to shut this down," one sergeant barked. "This is going to ruin lives." Vanessa stared him down. Maybe it should, because it wasn't just about Brody anymore. That video showed who laughed, who stayed silent, who enabled. It showed the entire system. Back in Brody's office, the lieutenant was pacing in circles, sweating into his collar. He was making calls to the union, to old friends, to anyone who could protect him. But no one answered. No one wanted to be tied to a sinking ship. His phone buzzed again. A message from his cousin in the state DA's office: "You're on your own. Don't call again." And then another from an unknown number. "They have everything. The emails, the logs, the complaints you buried, the chat threads. You better get a lawyer." Brody froze. What emails? What complaints? He had deleted everything. Or so he thought. The silence that followed the command to arrest Lieutenant Harrow was seismic. Nobody moved at first. The officers who had laughed with him now stood frozen, their eyes darting between each other and the woman they had mocked, now unmistakably in charge. "Move," Chief Monica Reynolds ordered, her voice steady, unyielding. 2 junior officers finally stepped forward. Their hands hesitated briefly before they took Harrow's arms. He jerked, tried to resist. "You can't do this," he growled. "I didn't know who you were. That changes everything." "No," Monica said, her gaze locked on his. "It changes nothing, because you shouldn't treat anyone the way you treated me, regardless of their badge." The handcuffs clicked, and with that sound, a decade of unchecked power began to unravel. As Harrow was led out, a ripple of unease swept through the room. But Monica wasn't finished. She turned to face the stunned officers and staff still standing in a half-circle of shame. "This isn't just about one man," she said. "It's about every person in this room who laughed, who turned away, who said nothing when you should have said something. That's complicity. That's cowardice, and it ends today." Some looked down. A few shifted nervously. Others stared straight ahead, bracing for what they knew was coming. But Monica wasn't interested in revenge. She was after the transformation, and she had the receipts to back it up. She walked to the center of the room, pulled a tablet from her bag, and tapped the screen. "This," she said, holding it up, "is the real reason I came in undercover. I wasn't just testing you. I was investigating." The screen displayed internal messages, real-time chat logs between Harrow and several senior officers. Some were crude, some were outright racist. One even joked about using pain compliance on mouthy protesters. And then came the messages about her, or who they thought she was. "Girl walked in like she runs the place. Want me to shut her up? Bet she's here for welfare papers. Another activist type. Should have sprayed her with OC. That send the message." Gasps rippled through the room. The names next to those messages were unmistakable. Captains, lieutenants, watch commanders. One of the senior officers in the back turned pale and sat down heavily. Monica's voice was low but lethal. "I gave this department a chance to reveal itself, and you did. Now the Department of Justice will see it too." Behind her, the HR director appeared, flanked by 2 city attorneys and the mayor's chief of staff. They had been waiting for this moment. The HR director stepped forward, clearing his throat. "Effective immediately, internal disciplinary review will begin for 7 officers named in these messages. All of them are being placed on administrative leave pending federal oversight." Chaos broke out, shouting, denials, some officers even demanding legal counsel on the spot. But then, the final twist. An officer burst through the door from the rear hallway, face flushed. "Chief, we found it. The footage." Monica narrowed her eyes. "Play it." The flat-screen monitor on the wall blinked to life. The break room camera footage showed a disturbing scene from 3 nights earlier. A young black female officer sitting alone, eating dinner. Harrow entered the room, made a derogatory comment under his breath, then knocked her meal onto the floor. When she stood to confront him, he slammed his hand down beside her head on the wall. Not quite a physical assault, but unmistakably threatening. The room gasped again. Some of the same officers who had stayed silent now shifted visibly, shame and anger battling for space on their faces. Monica spoke without looking away from the screen. She never reported it. You know why? Because she knew what the system would do, or wouldn't do. But now the system's being rewritten. She turned the monitor off. "We will investigate every incident, every buried complaint, every accidental deletion from the record logs." There was no applause, no murmurs of agreement, just a heavy, sobering silence, one that finally felt like the truth. But outside, something unexpected was brewing. A crowd had begun to gather. News had leaked that the new police chief had just ordered a lieutenant arrested, and not just any lieutenant, Richard Harrow, one of Arlington's so-called untouchables. Word spread like fire. By the time Monica stepped outside, the crowd had tripled in size. Protesters, reporters, residents, activists, veterans, parents with kids on their shoulders, even a few former officers. They weren't angry, they were watching. Monica stood on the station steps, her badge clipped visibly to her blazer now. Her bruised face was exposed, unapologetically. She hadn't spoken yet. Behind her, the city's mayor stepped up to the mic, his expression grave. "Today is not a crisis," he said. "It's a reckoning. And Chief Reynolds didn't just expose a problem, she showed us how to confront it." The mayor stepped aside. Monica stepped forward. She took a breath, and then she spoke. "You all saw what happened, but what you didn't see is how often it happens in rooms with no cameras. No cell phones, no public." She let that land. "I didn't come here to embarrass this department. I came to heal it. But healing doesn't happen without truth, and it doesn't happen without accountability." She paused again. "This badge," she said, tapping it, "means nothing if the people behind it don't serve with dignity. And I will not allow this city to be policed by fear, by bias, or by power unchecked." A long beat of silence. Then someone clapped, then another. and then a wave of applause rolled through the crowd, not out of celebration, but out of something deeper. Relief. Maybe, just maybe, things were about to change. Inside the precinct, the officers who remained watched through the glass doors. Some turned away, but others leaned closer. Something had shifted. Not everyone understood it yet, but they would, because the woman they tried to erase, she was just getting started. In the days that followed, Arlington didn't just wake up, it trembled. The footage of Lieutenant Harrow punching a black woman in the police station had gone viral, but the reveal that she was the newly appointed chief of police hit like a thunderclap. National outlets ran the headline for a week straight. Racist cop punches woman, then kneels when he learns she's the police chief. The video was raw, grainy, but devastatingly clear. It captured not only the punch, but the silence in the room, the stillness of complicity, and then it captured the moment everything flipped. Monica Reynolds, standing tall, blood on her lip and fire in her voice, calmly ordered her attacker arrested. It was the kind of moment that rewrote narratives. Overnight, Monica was asked to appear on national talk shows. She declined. She didn't want a spotlight. She wanted a system fixed. And she was just getting started. Behind the scenes, a joint task force had begun auditing past disciplinary records. More names surfaced. Officers with patterns of abuse, racial bias complaints, and excessive force charges, quietly buried or dismissed. With the DOJ's cooperation, Monica initiated full reform, an external civilian review board with the power to investigate and recommend disciplinary action. No more police investigating police behind closed doors. Training procedures were overhauled. Officers were now required to attend equity and de-escalation training. Every complaint would be reviewed not just for policy violations, but for patterns, unconscious bias, language use, escalation rates, and perhaps most critically, Monica launched a whistleblower initiative. Anonymous, protected, and direct to her desk. It didn't take long before messages began pouring in. Officers who had kept silent for years now had a place to speak. For the first time, trust began to stretch, not fully formed, but emerging like new roots breaking through dry ground. But not everyone embraced the change. Some senior officers resigned in protest. Others filed lawsuits. Monica didn't flinch. She welcomed the scrutiny. "Let the courts see what we've allowed for too long," she said. Lieutenant Harrow was charged with assault, obstruction, and abuse of authority. His trial was set to begin within 2 months. But before it even started, he issued a statement, or rather, his lawyer did. No apology, no remorse, just a claim that he was unaware of the victim's position of authority. That line echoed across the media like a confession of ignorance dressed as defense. Monica didn't respond publicly. She didn't have to. Because across the city, in churches, schools, barbershops, and community centers, people were already talking, not just about what happened, but about how it was handled. For once, justice hadn't been delayed. It had arrived, swift, unapologetic, and in uniform. One Sunday, Monica visited a local middle school. She had been invited by a history teacher who wanted her to speak to students about leadership. When she walked in, the students stood and applauded without being asked. After the class, a quiet boy stayed behind. He was maybe 12, lanky, with big eyes and nervous energy. "My dad told me cops don't care about people like us," he said. "But he said maybe you're different." Monica knelt down to his level. "We have to be," she replied. That moment stayed with her longer than any headline ever would. Weeks passed. New leadership emerged in the department. Officers who had been overlooked were now promoted for their integrity and service. Slowly, the culture began to shift. Not by speeches, but by action. One day, Monica stood alone in her office, holding the now infamous photo of her face swollen from Harrow's punch, her jaw set with resolve. The image had been framed and sent anonymously with a note. "For every time they tried to silence you, and you made noise anyway," she smiled, then set the frame down. Outside, Arlington wasn't perfect. The work ahead was still long. There were still critics, still pushback, still pain, but there was also movement, and sometimes that was enough to start something unstoppable. As she left the building that night, Monica passed a group of new cadets lining up for orientation. They didn't laugh. They stood straighter when she walked by, because they knew something their predecessors didn't. Power isn't how loud you speak, it's how clearly you stand. especially when the room goes silent. The night was thick with Georgia heat when 9-year-old Jasmine Miller first learned what injustice felt like. It wasn't on the news or in a history book. It was right there, in front of her, under the flickering streetlight outside a corner store that sold penny candy and stale soda. Her father, Marcus Miller, stood in handcuffs. His pressed uniform, fresh off his shift from the city sanitation department, was stained with sweat and humiliation. And across from him, a white officer with mirrored shades and a smug grin paced slowly, casually, like this was just another Tuesday. Jasmine stood on the curb, clutching her daddy's lunchbox. Her fingers were sticky from the jelly beans he'd bought her minutes before. She hadn't moved since the cuffs clicked. "Keep your mouth shut and let the officer do his job," her mother whispered, voice trembling. But Jasmine's wide eyes never left her father. Marcus wasn't shouting. He wasn't resisting. He was explaining, calmly, that he'd accidentally bumped a display while reaching for his wallet. He offered to pay for the fallen box of detergent, that he wasn't stealing anything, but the officer wasn't listening. None of them ever did. All Jasmine could remember was how her father's dignity evaporated under the stare of passers-by. How the store clerk, a teenager with too much eyeliner and not enough backbone, just watched, and how her mother kept whispering, "Don't cry. If you cry, they'll think we did something wrong." That night etched itself into Jasmine's bones. Long after her father was released with no charges, long after the department regretted the misunderstanding, long after the officer's name was forgotten by everyone else, but not by her, because that was the night Jasmine made herself a promise. They won't look at me like that. Not ever again. And if they look at anyone else that way, I'll make sure they regret it. By the time Jasmine reached middle school, she had stopped raising her hand in class just to prove she was the smartest in the room. She already knew she was. Now she raised it to challenge things. Outdated rules, biased policies, teachers who subtly punished students for being too loud, too defensive, too black. She stopped wearing her hair straight, let the coils fly wild and free, even when it meant whispers or stares. She joined the debate, joined mock trial. And when someone called her too intense, she smiled like they'd handed her a compliment. Her father taught her how to walk away from fights. Her mother taught her how to survive a world built to keep people like her small. But Jasmine, she taught herself how to fight smart, how to fight like the system wouldn't expect. College came with scholarships and side jobs and a suitcase of hand-me-downs. Jasmine didn't know anyone in her dorm, but within a month, everyone knew her. She wasn't the loudest, but she was the one who'd speak when others wouldn't. She majored in criminal justice, minored in psychology. Not because she wanted to be a cop, but because she wanted to understand how the game was played before she tore the board apart. In her junior year, she interned at a precinct. It was supposed to be educational, observational, but within weeks, she saw how the rot festered from the inside. How some officers laughed off racial complaints like locker room banter. How they talked about those neighborhoods like war zones. How protect and serve only seemed to apply to some zip codes. Once, she watched a training officer slam a kid against a squad car for mouthing off. The boy couldn't have been older than 12. She wanted to scream. Instead, she wrote a report, documented it, quietly sent it to Internal Affairs. The officer was transferred, for unrelated reasons, they said. But Jasmine knew better. She was learning, watching, sharpening. The academy didn't want her at first. "You've got a chip on your shoulder," one recruiter said. "Damn right I do," she replied. "It's made of steel and I earned it." But eventually she got in, and not just that. She graduated top of her class. The girl who once watched her father get handcuffed for buying soap, she now wore a badge. But hers came with a warning. "I'm not here to play by your rules. I'm here to rewrite them." By her early 30s, Jasmine had been promoted twice. She was the one who questioned procedure, challenged her superiors, and filed complaints when everyone else stayed silent. They tried to freeze her out, tried to transfer her, tried to break her. But she wouldn't bend, because every time she closed her eyes, she saw her father's wrists. And that was enough. Enough to keep going. Enough to walk into the lion's den every day with her back straight and her mind sharp. She didn't climb the ladder to fit in, she climbed it to kick the door open from the top. By 42, she'd done what almost no one thought she could: captain. Internal Affairs. One of the only black women in that role in the state. She didn't announce it, didn't post it. But the day she got the call, she drove back to the corner store. The one from that night. It was boarded up now, faded, forgotten. But Jasmine stood there anyway, under the same streetlight, and whispered, "I kept the promise, Daddy." The sun dipped low over Arlington's skyline, casting a golden haze across the precinct windows. Inside, the air felt different. Not lighter, not yet, but charged, as if something old and heavy had finally cracked open, letting in a breath of something new. Monica Reynolds stood in her office, watching the streets below. Sirens still wailed in the distance. Calls still came in. The city hadn't paused for her reckoning. But somewhere out there, a little girl was walking home from school, and for the first time, she might believe that justice didn't always look the other way. That thought grounded her. She turned back to her desk, now covered in paperwork, resignations, subpoenas, and statements from officers who never thought they'd have the courage to speak. Some of the worst had already been placed on leave, a few quietly lawyered up, others just vanished, knowing their time was up. But it wasn't about revenge. It never was. It was about truth. Uncomfortable, undressed, undeniable truth. And what people chose to do once it stared them in the face. Her door was knocked gently. Officer Malik Gaines stepped in, young, nervous, but changed. He saluted, then offered a small box. "What's this?" Monica asked. He hesitated. "Footage, from 2 years ago. Internal stuff. I wasn't sure anyone would care back then." She took it. "But you saved it anyway." "Yes, ma'am." He didn't wait for thanks, just nodded, turned, and left. As the door clicked shut, Monica looked down at the box, proof that someone, even when afraid, had decided not to be silent. Outside the precinct, the media had thinned. Protesters had gone home, but flowers had been left by the steps, dozens of them. Small notes tucked beneath them. "Thank you. For Jasmine, for my brother, for not staying quiet." And tucked beneath one bouquet, scrawled in a child's hand, "When I grow up, I want to be like you." Monica sat with that for a while, because she remembered being that girl. Not wanting to be a hero, just wanting the world to make sense, just wanting her father's name to be spoken without shame. She wants her people to be treated like people. That dream had taken decades to fight for, and now, it had a name. Not hers, not Brody's, not even Harrow's, but every name they tried to erase. She stood, walked to the locker room, and opened the oldest cabinet. Inside was her first uniform, creased and faded, still holding the scent of late nights and rookie nerves. She didn't put it on. She didn't need to. Because power didn't come from badges or brass or cameras. It came from choosing, again and again, to stand up when silence would be easier, to speak when others whisper, to hold the line when no one else will. She stepped outside, past the glass doors, into the cooling dusk. Cadets in training stood nearby, their posture stiffer now, not from fear, but from respect. And among them, a young black girl in uniform stared at her with wide, determined eyes. Monica nodded to her. The girl nodded back. And in that silent exchange, the legacy was passed. Not with ceremony, but with certainty. Because Arlington had changed. Not perfectly. Not completely. But irreversibly. And when the night came again, thick and long and full of doubt, it would know one thing for sure. Chief Monica Reynolds was no longer the exception. She was the beginning.